He bought a Cold War bunker for $5, but when his dog found a hidden vault, it exposed a truth someone would kill to keep buried. A homeless Navy SEAL bought a $5 Cold War bunker. His dog found a hidden vault. The Montana hills were quiet the day Ethan Cole arrived, like the land itself was holding its breath. He wasn't looking for answers, just a place to disappear. But his old K9, Shadow, stopped cold at the buried door and refused to move. Some instincts don't fade, and some secrets were never meant to stay hidden. Comment 1 if you'd open that door, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. The road into Bitterroot Valley narrowed until it stopped pretending to be a road at all. Gravel gave way to dirt, and dirt gave way to something closer to memory. 2 faint tire tracks cutting through tall grass that bent under a gray Montana sky. Mist rolled low across the foothills, clinging to the ground like it had nowhere better to be. Pines stood scattered along the ridge, dark and still, their silhouettes fading into the clouds. Ethan Cole drove the last mile without music. The truck rattled with every dip in the earth, a tired old Ford that had outlived better days and better men. Dust coated the dashboard. A cracked photograph sat tucked near the radio, faded enough that the faces were almost gone. Ethan didn't look at it. He kept his eyes on the hill. It rose ahead of him. Not tall, not dramatic, just wrong. A rounded slope of earth and stone that seemed to interrupt the land instead of belonging to it. The grass grew thinner there, patchy and uneven, as if something beneath the surface refused to let it settle. Beside him, Shadow lifted his head. The old German shepherd moved slowly, joints stiff from years that had taken more than they'd given back. His coat, once deep black and tan, had turned gray around the muzzle and eyes. One ear stood straight, the other bent slightly at the tip, a reminder of a mission neither of them ever talked about. Shadow didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just stared. Ethan noticed. "You see it too?" he muttered, though he wasn't sure what it was. The dog didn't respond, but his posture changed. His body leaned forward, alert in a way that didn't match his age. Not curiosity, not excitement, recognition. Ethan exhaled slowly and turned the engine off. Silence fell hard. Out here, silence wasn't empty. It pressed in from every direction, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant whisper of wind through dry grass. No traffic, no voices, no distant hum of life. Just the hill. He stepped out of the truck, boots hitting the ground with a dull crunch. The air was colder than it should have been for late afternoon. It carried the faint scent of damp earth and something metallic underneath, so subtle it could have been imagined. Shadow jumped down a second later, landing carefully. His right hind leg stiffened for a moment before settling. He didn't shake it off. He never did anymore. Instead, he walked ahead, straight toward the hill. "Easy," Ethan said, closing the truck door behind him. "We just got here." But Shadow didn't slow. Ethan followed, his gaze scanning the terrain the way it always did. Habit. Training. The kind that didn't turn off just because the uniform was gone. He noted the slope, the line of trees, the way the ground dipped slightly near the base of the hill. And then he saw it. Concrete. It wasn't obvious at first, just a faint edge where the earth gave way to something man-made. As he got closer, the shape revealed itself, a recessed entrance carved into the hillside, partially hidden by weeds and time. A bunker. Cold War, if the paperwork was right. Decommissioned, abandoned, forgotten. sold at auction for $5 to a man with no fixed address and no better options. Ethan stopped a few feet from the entrance. The steel door was still there, set into a concrete frame that had cracked along the edges. Rust bled down from the hinges in dark streaks. A faded warning sign clung to the wall beside it, its yellow paint chipped and peeling. Radiation hazard, do not enter. Ethan studied it. Looks official, he said under his breath, but something about it didn't sit right. The edges of the sign were cleaner than the surrounding wall. The screws holding it in place caught the light differently, less corroded, less worn. Not new exactly, but not as old as everything else. Behind him, Shadow let out a low breath. Ethan turned. The dog wasn't looking at the sign. He was staring at the ground just in front of the door, completely still. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Shadow didn't move. Ethan stepped closer, boots scraping against gravel. He followed the dog's line of sight, scanning the dirt and scattered stones. At first he saw nothing, then a faint disturbance, not footprints, not exactly, just unevenness, a patch where the dust looked slightly darker, as if it had been shifted recently. Subtle enough that anyone else might have missed it. But Shadow hadn't. Ethan crouched down, running his fingers lightly across the surface. The soil was dry on top, but beneath it held a trace of moisture that didn't match the surrounding ground. "Someone's been here," he murmured. Shadow's ears twitched. The wind picked up, brushing against Ethan's jacket and carrying a hollow sound across the hillside. For a moment, it almost felt like the hill itself was breathing. Slow, patient, waiting. Ethan straightened, eyes moving back to the bunker door. $5, that's what it had cost him. $5 for a place no one wanted. $5 for a roof over his head. $5 for whatever came with it. Warnings, rumors, and whatever the town had decided was easier to fear than understand. He glanced back toward the road. From here, the valley stretched out in muted colors. Fields, distant fences, the faint outline of a small town miles away. He could almost picture it. A diner with too much coffee, a gas station where people talked too quietly when strangers walked in. They'd already looked at him that way, the man with the dog, the man who bought the hill, the man who didn't belong. Ethan turned back to the bunker. "Guess it's ours now," he said. Shadow didn't respond. He stepped closer to the door, nose lowering toward the seam where metal met concrete. He didn't sniff like a curious animal. He investigated like he'd been trained to, slow, deliberate, focused. Then he stopped. His body went rigid. Ethan felt it immediately. That shift, that silent signal that had once meant danger, explosives, something hidden just out of sight. "What is it?" Ethan asked again, quieter now. Shadow didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the door. No, past it, through it. As if whatever he sensed wasn't on the surface, but buried deep inside the hill. Ethan's chest tightened slightly. Not fear, not yet. Just that old instinct rising up. The one that had kept him alive in places where mistakes didn't get second chances. He reached out. Placing his hand against the cold steel, the metal held no warmth, no give. Just solid, unyielding resistance. For a second, he considered walking away, finding another place. Another patch of land where the ground didn't feel like it was hiding something. But that wasn't who he was, not anymore. "All right," he said softly. Shadow's ears flicked. "We're staying." The wind moved across the hill again, stronger this time, bending the grass in slow waves. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called once and fell silent. Ethan kept his hand on the door. Shadow didn't move, and beneath them both, buried in concrete and time, something waited, not forgotten, just hidden, and the dog had already found it. Ethan kept his hand against the steel for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if the metal might answer him if he waited long enough. It didn't. It stayed cold, silent, and completely indifferent. Shadow didn't move. The old dog stood with his nose inches from the seam of the door, body stiff, eyes fixed on something Ethan couldn't see. Not outside, not in the light, inside. "All right," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to the dog. "Let's take a look." He stepped back and studied the entrance more carefully this time. The concrete frame had cracks running through it like veins, but the structure itself held firm. The hinges were rusted, but not frozen. The handle, a heavy industrial lever, sat slightly off-center, worn smooth in places that suggested use, not recent use, but not ancient either. Ethan reached out and tested it. At first, it didn't move. Then, with a slow, grinding resistance, the mechanism shifted. Metal scraped against metal with a low, hollow sound that echoed faintly into the hill. Shadow took a step back. That was enough to make Ethan pause. "You don't like it," he said. The dog didn't answer, but his ears flattened just slightly. Not fear, but caution. The kind that came from experience. Ethan had seen that look before. Different places, different doors, same feeling. He pulled harder. The door gave. A breath of air slipped out from the darkness beyond. Cool, stale, and carrying a faint scent of dust and something older. Not rot, not decay, just time. Ethan stood still, letting his eyes adjust as much as they could from the outside light. The interior swallowed the sun quickly, turning everything beyond the threshold into shadow. "Stay close," he said. Shadow didn't need the command. They stepped inside together. The temperature dropped immediately. Not drastically, but enough to feel unnatural compared to the open air outside. The bunker held the cold the way a cave did, steady, unmoving. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness in a narrow cone, revealing a concrete corridor sloping slightly downward. Dust covered everything, the walls, the floor, the exposed piping that ran along the ceiling in rusted lines. The air carried that dry, chalky smell of a place sealed too long. Their footsteps echoed softly. Ethan moved slowly, scanning every corner, every angle. Habit again. Always habit. The first chamber opened up a few steps in. It was larger than he expected, wide enough to hold shelving units, a few old cots, and what looked like a small operations desk bolted to the floor. Most of it had collapsed or decayed into useless shapes, but not all of it. Ethan's flashlight swept across the walls and stopped. A sign, "Radiation hazard, do not enter." He walked closer, same style, same faded yellow, but this one, he frowned. The paint was chipped, but not in the same way as the concrete behind it. The edges looked worn, but the screws holding it in place caught the light again, just like outside. "Cleaner, content," he murmured. Shadow moved past him, straight toward the back of the room. Ethan followed the beam of his own light, watching as the dog crossed the chamber without hesitation. Not exploring, not sniffing randomly, tracking. "What do you smell?" Ethan asked. Shadow didn't slow. He reached the far wall, where the corridor continued deeper into the bunker, and then stopped again. This time, it wasn't just a hallway. It was a door, round, steel, heavy, set into the wall like something built to outlast whatever had created it. Ethan's breath slowed. "Vault," he said under his breath. The door was different from the outer one. Thicker, reinforced, designed for pressure, for containment, maybe even for protection against something worse than time. A large wheel lock sat at its center, coated in rust but intact, and beside it, another sign, "Radiation hazard, do not enter." Ethan stepped closer, his boots crunching lightly over debris. 3 signs, he said, all saying the same thing. He crouched down near the edge of the door, angling the flashlight across the surface. The beam revealed the details more clearly now. The uneven corrosion, the scratches near the hinges, and the screws. He leaned in. "They don't match." Shadow let out a low breath. Ethan reached out and touched one of the screws with his fingertip. The metal was smoother than it should have been, less pitted, less eaten away by time. "Replaced," he said. He pulled his hand back and stood slowly. The air in the corridor felt heavier now, not physically, not something you could measure, but enough. Ethan turned, sweeping the flashlight back across the chamber they had just entered. Dust still covered everything, but now that he was looking for it, he saw it. A faint line near the floor, a disturbance, not footprints, not exactly. Just a subtle break in the layer of dust that suggested movement. Something or someone had passed through here not long ago. "Not abandoned," he said quietly. Shadow shifted his weight, positioning himself directly in front of the vault door, guarding it. Ethan watched him for a moment. "You think something's in there," he said. The dog didn't look away. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, tension building slowly under the surface. This wasn't what he'd expected. Not for $5, not for a place everyone else had ignored. He walked back toward the first chamber, scanning again, more carefully now, the desk, the shelves, the walls. His light caught something small near the edge of the table. A glint. Ethan stepped closer. It was a screw, loose, sitting on the surface like it had been dropped and forgotten. He picked it up. Same type as the ones holding the warning signs. Same cleaner finish. He turned it between his fingers, feeling the weight of it. "Someone's been working in here," he said. Shadow's nails clicked softly against the concrete as he shifted position down the hall. Ethan slipped the screw into his pocket. The silence returned, thicker now. He looked back toward the corridor, where the round vault door sat in shadow, half swallowed by darkness. The feeling crept in then. Familiar, unwelcome. The same quiet pressure he'd felt before entering buildings overseas. The same instinct that told him something didn't line up, even if he couldn't explain it yet. He walked back toward Shadow. The dog didn't move. Ethan stopped beside him, shining the light across the door one more time. "You're not letting this go, are you?" he asked. Shadow blinked once. That was answer enough. Ethan sighed. "Yeah," he said. "Me neither." He placed his hand against the steel again, colder this time. Or maybe that was just him. For a moment, he considered trying the wheel lock, testing it, seeing if the door would open. But something stopped him. Not fear, not hesitation, timing. He pulled his hand away. "Not yet," he said. Shadow didn't argue. Ethan turned back toward the entrance. "Let's get some air." They walked out of the bunker together, the light growing stronger with each step until the outside world returned in full color and sound. The wind had picked up. Clouds moved faster now across the sky, casting shifting shadows over the hill. Ethan took a deep breath. Fresh air, open space. But it didn't feel the same anymore. He looked back at the entrance. From this angle, it almost disappeared into the hillside again. Just a dark cut in the earth, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. But now he knew. It wasn't empty. It wasn't forgotten. And whatever was behind that vault door, someone had gone to a lot of trouble to keep it that way. Shadow stood beside him, eyes still fixed on the hill, not the door, not the entrance. Deeper than that. Ethan followed his gaze, though there was nothing to see but grass and stone. Still, he felt it, that same quiet certainty building in his chest. "This place isn't hiding from people," he said slowly. Shadow didn't move. Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's being hidden for a reason." The wind swept across the hill again, stronger now, bending the grass in long, restless waves, and somewhere beneath their feet, something waited, not gone, not abandoned, just sealed away and watched. Ethan didn't move for a long moment. The wind passed over the hill in slow, steady waves, bending the grass as if something unseen moved beneath it. Shadow stood beside him, still as stone, his gaze fixed on the ground like he was listening to something far below the surface. Ethan finally turned away. "Come on," he said quietly. Shadow followed, though he hesitated once, just a fraction, before leaving the bunker behind. That hesitation stayed with Ethan. He walked back to the truck, each step heavier than it should have been. The hill didn't feel like the place anymore. It felt like a presence, something aware, something patient. He opened the passenger door. Shadow climbed in slowly, careful with his hind leg, settling onto the worn floor mat without a sound. Ethan shut the door and circled around to the driver's side. He didn't start the engine right away. Instead, he sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring out at the hill through the cracked windshield. "You feel it too," he said. Shadow didn't answer. He didn't have to. Ethan leaned back in the seat and closed his eyes. That's when the past came in. It never knocked. It never asked permission. It just arrived. The heat hit first, dry, blinding, suffocating. Ethan stood in a broken village halfway across the world, dust clinging to his skin, the smell of smoke thick in the air. The radio crackled at his shoulder. Voices layered over each other. Commands, coordinates, urgency disguised as control. "Cole, confirm target." He looked through the scope again. The building was there, just like the intel said, but so were the people. Movement inside. Small shapes, not armed, not trained, not threats. "Cole, confirm." His finger hovered near the trigger. "Negative," he said. "Civilians inside, static, then proceed as ordered." Eth didn't move. "Repeat," the voice came back, colder now. "Proceed as ordered." The building stayed in his sights. The civilians stayed there too. He lowered the weapon. "Can't do it," he said. Silence, then the shift. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet change in tone that told him everything he needed to know. "Stand down, Cole." He did. And that was the moment everything ended. Ethan opened his eyes. The Montana sky replaced the desert. Cold air instead of heat. Silence instead of gunfire. But the weight, that stayed the same. He rubbed his face with one hand, exhaling slowly. "They didn't like that," he muttered. Shadow lifted his head slightly. Ethan glanced at him. "Yeah," he said. "I know, you didn't either." The dog blinked once, steady and calm. Back then, Shadow had been faster, stronger, younger. He had stood at Ethan's side through more missions than Ethan could count. Not as a tool, not as equipment, as a partner. When the paperwork came down, when Ethan was reassigned, then sidelined, then quietly removed, Shadow had been marked for transfer. Temperament issues, they said, unresponsive to new handlers. Ethan had looked at the report and almost laughed. Good, he'd said. He signed the papers, took the dog, and walked away from everything else. The truck engine finally turned over. Ethan backed away from the hill, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The road stretched out ahead of him, leading back toward the small town he'd passed through earlier. Flint Ridge, population small enough that strangers stood out immediately. He didn't like towns like that. Too many eyes, too many questions. But he needed supplies and answers. The town appeared slowly through the trees. A handful of buildings gathered around a central road. A diner, a gas station, a feed store, and a sheriff's office that sat slightly apart from the rest. American flags hung from porches, their edges worn from years of wind. Ethan pulled into the gas station. The moment the engine cut, the silence broke. Voices, low at first, then gone. Two men standing near the pump turned their heads toward him. One wore a faded cap. The other leaned against a truck with arms crossed. They didn't smile, they didn't greet him. They just watched. Ethan stepped out. Shadow stayed in the truck, eyes tracking everything through the windshield. "You're new," the man in the cap said. Ethan nodded once. "Just passing through." The other man shook his head slightly. "Don't look like it." Ethan didn't respond. He moved to the pump, inserting the nozzle, letting the routine ground him. The familiar motions helped, always had. The man in the cap glanced toward the road Ethan had come from. "You go up that way?" he asked. Ethan followed his gaze. "The hill," the man added. Ethan met his eyes. "Yeah." A pause, then a quiet laugh from the second man. "Bought it, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't answer, didn't need to. The man in the cap shook his head slowly. $5, he said. "That's what they sold it for." Ethan felt his grip tighten slightly on the nozzle. Something like that. The second man pushed off the truck, stepping closer. "You know why it was $5?" he asked. Ethan looked at him. "Because nobody wants it." "Why?" The man's smile faded. "Because it's not empty." Silence settled between them. The wind moved across the station, rattling a loose sign somewhere above. Ethan held the man's gaze. "What's in it?" he asked. The man shrugged. "Depends who you ask." "Who should I ask?" The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the sheriff's office down the road, then back to Ethan. "You won't like the answer." Ethan gave a small, tired nod. "Story of my life." The pump clicked off. He pulled the nozzle free and replaced it, the metal clinking softly against the holder. When he turned back, the men had stepped away, conversation over, or maybe just postponed. Inside the truck, Shadow hadn't moved. Ethan got in and shut the door, the outside noise fading instantly. He looked at the dog. "You hear that?" he asked. Shadow's ears shifted slightly. Ethan started the engine. "Not empty," he repeated. He pulled out of the station slowly, the town watching him the same way the men had. Quiet, cautious, measuring. As he passed the sheriff's office, he caught a glimpse of someone standing inside, watching. Ethan didn't slow down. He drove straight through town and back toward the hill. By the time he reached the base of the slope again, the sky had darkened slightly. Clouds gathered thicker now, turning the light flat and gray. The hill looked different, not physically, but now that he knew what to look for. He saw it. The way the grass shifted unevenly, the faint lines in the soil, the subtle signs that something beneath the surface had been disturbed more than once. Ethan parked the truck. Shadow didn't wait this time. He stepped out and moved toward the bunker with purpose, his limp barely slowing him. Ethan followed. The entrance waited, silent, unchanged, but not forgotten, not empty, and definitely not alone. As Ethan stepped closer, he felt it again. That quiet pressure, that instinct, the same one that had told him to say no when everyone else said yes, the same one that had cost him everything. He stopped just short of the door. Shadow stood beside it, looking back at him now, waiting, not pushing, just ready. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said. His voice was steady now, not calm, but certain. "Let's find out what they didn't want us to see." The wind picked up again, moving across the hill in long, restless waves, and beneath them, whatever had been buried was still there, waiting for someone who wouldn't walk away. This time, Ethan wasn't going to. He stepped forward and gripped the outer bunker door again, the cold steel pressing into his palm like a warning he chose to ignore. Shadow moved with him, close and deliberate, his body angled toward the entrance, as if guarding Ethan from something that hadn't happened yet. The door opened easier this time, not welcoming, just expecting. They went inside. The air felt thicker now, like the bunker had noticed them before and was no longer pretending otherwise. Ethan moved with purpose, flashlight cutting clean lines through the dim corridor. No hesitation this time. No stopping in the first chamber. They went straight to the inner corridor, straight to the round vault door. Shadow reached it first. He didn't pace now. He didn't sniff. He stood, still, guarding. Ethan stepped beside him, eyes tracing every inch of the steel again. The wheel lock, the seams, the bolts, the mismatched screws. Everything about it told a story, and none of it matched the one people in town were telling. He crouched down, running the flashlight along the base of the door. The dust was disturbed again, but now that he was looking closer, he saw more, not just movement, patterns, faint arcs, like something heavy had been dragged, scratches along the lower edge, and then a thin line of something darker. Ethan touched it. Dirt, mixed with something else. Oil, maybe, or grease, maintenance, he said under his breath. Shadow's ears twitched. Ethan stood. "Someone didn't just come through here," he added. "They worked here." The idea settled in, not abandoned, maintained. That meant intent, that meant purpose, and that meant someone had a reason to keep this place exactly the way it was. A sound cut through the silence, not inside, outside. Ethan's head snapped toward the entrance, engine, faint at first, then clearer, a vehicle climbing the hill. Shadow turned immediately, moving back toward the first chamber with controlled urgency. Ethan followed. They reached the entrance just as the sound of gravel crunching came to a stop. Through the opening, Ethan saw it. A sheriff's cruiser, parked near his truck. Figures moved. 2 of them. Ethan stepped out into the open air, blinking once as the light hit him. The wind had picked up again, carrying the scent of rain from somewhere deeper in the valley. The first man approached slowly, mid-50s, maybe older. Broad shoulders, clean uniform, a calm expression that looked practiced rather than natural. His badge caught the gray light just enough to draw attention. Sheriff Grant Holloway. The second man stayed near the cruiser, younger, quieter, watching everything. "Afternoon," the sheriff said. Ethan didn't smile. Something like that. Holloway's eyes moved past him, briefly scanning the bunker entrance, then settling on Shadow, who had positioned himself just behind Ethan's leg. "That your dog?" Holloway asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah. He friendly?" "No." The sheriff smiled slightly, like he appreciated the honesty. "Fair enough." A pause. The wind moved between them, lifting dust from the ground. Holloway clasped his hands loosely in front of him. "Heard you bought this place," he said. "Word travels fast." "Small town," Holloway replied. "Not much else to do but talk." Ethan didn't respond. The sheriff took a few slow steps closer. Not enough to threaten, just enough to test space. "You know what you bought?" he asked. Ethan met his eyes. "A bunker." Holloway's smile faded slightly. "That's one way to put it. What's the other way?" The sheriff glanced back toward the hill, then toward the bunker entrance again. "A liability," he said. "Environmental risks, structural issues, old federal property that was never properly cleared." Ethan crossed his arms. "Funny," he said. "Didn't hear much about that at the auction." Holloway's expression didn't change. They don't always say everything they should. Silence stretched. Shadow shifted slightly, his body tightening. Ethan felt it. "Why are you here?" he asked. The sheriff tilted his head, considering the question. "Just doing my job," he said. "Making sure new property owners understand what they're dealing with. Feels like more than that." Holloway smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes this time. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Must have served you well." Ethan didn't react. The sheriff took another step closer. "Let me give you some advice," he said, voice lowering slightly. "Places like this, they come with history. Not all of it written down. Not all of it safe to dig into." Ethan held his gaze. "I'm not much for digging," he said. Shadow shifted again. Holloway noticed. His eyes flicked briefly to the dog, then back to Ethan. "People in town are already talking," he continued. "They're nervous. That hill's had a reputation for a long time. Radiation, accidents, things better left alone." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Radiation," he repeated. "That why the warning signs look newer than the bunker?" The question hung in the air. For a split second, something changed in Holloway's expression. Small, almost invisible. But Ethan saw it, then it was gone. "Maintenance," the sheriff said smoothly. "County responsibility." Ethan nodded slowly. "Inside too?" he asked. Holloway didn't answer right away. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, rattling the dry grass around them. "Finally, you been inside?" the sheriff asked. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yeah," another pause. "Longer this time." Holloway studied him carefully, like he was measuring something that didn't have a clear edge. "That wasn't smart," he said. Ethan shrugged slightly. "Didn't feel dangerous." The sheriff's voice hardened. "Just a little. Not everything dangerous feels that way," he said. Shadow let out a low, quiet sound. Not a growl, a warning. Holloway looked down at him again. "That dog seems tense," he said. "He usually is when something's off," Ethan replied. The sheriff's eyes lifted back to his. "Something off?" he repeated. Ethan didn't blink. "Yeah," another silence. Then Holloway stepped back, breaking the tension just enough. "Well," he said, adjusting his jacket. "I'll keep this simple." He gestured toward the hill. "That land's more trouble than it's worth. Always has been." Ethan said nothing. Holloway continued. "You've got options," he said. "You can hold on to it. Deal with inspections, permits, whatever comes with it. Or you can walk away. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Walk away? I know a buyer, the sheriff said. Private, discreet, pays cash, no questions asked. There it was, not a warning, an offer. Ethan let the silence sit for a moment. Then, how much? He asked. Holloway smiled again. More than $5, Ethan almost laughed. Almost, but it didn't reach his face. I just got here, he said. The sheriff nodded. Doesn't mean you have to stay. Ethan looked past him, toward the cruiser, toward the road leading back into town, then back at the hill, then back at the sheriff. I think I'll take my chances, he said. Holloway's smile faded completely now. Not anger, not yet, just something colder. That's your call, he said. He turned slightly, signaling to the deputy by the cruiser, then paused. One more thing, he added, glancing back at Ethan. Yeah? If you hear anything, Holloway said, or if anything unusual happens, you call my office, Ethan nodded once. Sure. The sheriff held his gaze for a second longer, then turned and walked back to the cruiser. The engine started, gravel shifted, and just like that, they were gone, the silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. Ethan stood there, watching the road long after the cruiser disappeared. Shadow stepped forward, moving closer to the bunker entrance again, drawn back. Ethan exhaled slowly. Well, he said, the word hung in the air. He looked at the hill, at the bunker, at the place no one wanted, and the offer that came too fast, too clean, too easy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the loose screw he'd found earlier, turning it between his fingers, feeling its smooth edges against his skin. They don't want this place, he said quietly. Shadow stood beside him. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. They want what's inside it. The wind moved across the hill again, carrying that same faint metallic scent. Ethan turned back toward the bunker. The door waited, silent, unchanged. But now, it felt different, not just hidden, protected, and whatever was behind that vault door was worth enough for someone to lie about it, threaten for it, and now, offer money to take it back. Ethan stepped forward, Shadow followed, and neither of them hesitated this time. The bunker swallowed them again, the outside world sealing off behind their backs like a door that didn't want to open twice. Ethan didn't go straight to the vault, not this time. He stopped in the first chamber, letting his eyes adjust while his thoughts caught up. The sheriff's visit sat heavy in his chest. Not fear, not even anger, something sharper, pattern. He had seen it before, different country, different language, same structure. First came the warning, then the pressure, then the offer. That meant there was something worth protecting, and someone willing to protect it. Ethan turned slowly, scanning the room again with new eyes, not just looking for signs of presence, but signs of intent. Shadow moved across the floor, nose low, following the same invisible thread he had since the beginning. But instead of heading straight for the inner corridor, he stopped near the back wall, a shelf, bent, rusted, collapsing in on itself. Ethan walked over. What is it? He asked quietly. Shadow pawed once at the base of the shelf. Ethan crouched down, pushing aside a broken piece of wood and debris. The dust shifted, revealing something half buried beneath it. Paper. Old. Brittle. He picked it up carefully. A map, faded lines, grid markings, coordinates that meant nothing at first glance. but everything to someone who knew how to read them. Ethan's brow tightened. "Isn't junk," he said. Shadow huffed softly. Ethan turned the map over, stamped in the corner, barely visible. U.S. government property. He stared at it for a moment, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his jacket. "Not abandoned," he muttered again. But now it felt heavier, deliberate. That evening, Ethan drove back into Flint Ridge. The sky had darkened to a deep gray blue, the kind that promised rain but hadn't delivered yet. The town looked the same as before, but now it felt different, quieter, watching. He parked near the diner. Shadow stayed in the truck this time, but his eyes followed Ethan through the window, alert and focused. "I'll be back," Ethan said. The dog didn't move. Ethan stepped inside. The bell above the door rang once. Every head turned, just for a second. Then conversations resumed. Quieter now, more controlled. Ethan walked to the counter and took a seat. Coffee arrived without him asking. He glanced up. The woman behind the counter was older, late 60s, maybe early 70s. Sharp eyes, gray hair pulled back tight. She didn't smile. "You're the one who bought the hill," she said. Ethan took a sip of the coffee. "Word travels fast." She snorted lightly. "In a place like this, it doesn't travel, it lives here." Ethan set the cup down. "What do people say about it?" The woman studied him for a moment, then leaned slightly closer. "They say it's cursed," she said. "They say it's dangerous. They say people who go up there don't stay long." Ethan nodded slowly. "What do you say?" The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she wiped the counter in front of him with a slow, deliberate motion. "I say," she finally replied, "people don't like what they don't understand." Ethan held her gaze. "Name's Clara," she added. "Ethan, I know." Of course she did. Clara leaned against the counter. "You didn't come here for coffee," she said. "No. What did you come for?" Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out the folded map. He set it on the counter between them. Clara didn't touch it, but her eyes sharpened. "Where'd you get that?" she asked. Bunker, a pause, then figures. Watched her carefully. "You've seen it before," he said. Clara sighed softly, like she'd been waiting for this moment longer than she wanted to admit. "Not that exact one," she said, "but things like it. Explain." Clara glanced around the diner, then back at him. "Not here," she said. 10 minutes later, Ethan stood outside behind the diner. The air had cooled. The wind carried the scent of coming rain stronger now. Clara stepped out, closing the door behind her. "You're not the first person to ask questions about that hill," she said. Ethan crossed his arms. "And they don't usually stick around long enough to get answers." "Why?" Clara looked toward the road. "Because someone makes sure they don't." Silence settled between them. Ethan nodded once. "Sheriff Holloway," he said. Clara didn't react, but that was reaction enough. "He came by," Ethan added. "I'm sure he did. He offered to buy the land." That made her look at him. Really look at him. "And you said no." "Yeah." Clara let out a slow breath. "Then you're already in deeper than most." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the screw, holding it up between his fingers. "These match the signs inside," he said. "Newer than everything else." Clara's eyes flicked to it. "Makes," she said quietly. "That's what they call it. They." Clara hesitated. Then, "Families," she said. Names that have been here longer than anyone remembers. People who don't like outsiders digging into things that were buried on purpose. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. What's in the bunker? Clara shook her head. If I knew that, she said, I wouldn't still be standing here. Another voice cut in from behind them. You're asking the wrong questions. Ethan turned. A man stood near the edge of the alley. Mid-40s, glasses, jacket zipped halfway up despite the mild temperature. He looked out of place in the same way Ethan did, but for different reasons. Lucas, Clara said. Clara. The man stepped closer, extending a hand. Dr. Lucas Mercer, he said. Environmental engineer. Ethan shook it. Ethan Cole. Lucas nodded once. I figured, he said. Ethan glanced between them. You two know each other. Clara smiled faintly. Small town. Lucas adjusted his glasses. I heard about the bunker, he said, and I heard someone finally bought it. Ethan waited. Lucas continued. I also heard people are still using the word radiation like it's gospel, and? Ethan asked. Lucas shook his head. I've seen contaminated sites, he said. They don't get maintained like that. They get sealed, documented, and monitored properly. Ethan leaned slightly forward. So it's not dangerous? Lucas shrugged. Everything's dangerous if you don't understand it, he said. But from what you're describing, the signs feel more like deterrence. Clara nodded slowly. Fear's easier to manage than facts, she said. Ethan looked between them. Then what are they hiding? Lucas met his eyes. That's the wrong question, he said. Ethan frowned. What's the right one? Lucas's expression hardened slightly. Who benefits from no one going inside? Silence. That landed. Ethan felt the shift again. That same clarity he'd felt earlier on the hill. Pattern, control, intent. He looked back toward his truck, where Shadow still sat, watching, then back at Clara and Lucas. I'm going back up there, he said. Clara nodded once. I figured you would. Lucas hesitated. Then I'll come with you, he said. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Why? Lucas adjusted his glasses again, a small nervous habit. Because if I'm right, he said, then whatever's in that bunker isn't just your problem. Ethan considered that, then nodded. Tomorrow, he said. Clara crossed her arms. You're going to need more than curiosity, she added. Ethan looked at her. Like what? Clara's eyes held his. Truth, she said, and the willingness to pay for it. The wind picked up again, stronger now, carrying the first drops of rain. Ethan turned toward the truck. Shadow was already watching him, waiting, ready, and whatever lay beneath that hill was no longer just hidden. It was starting to surface. Morning came slow over the Montana hills. Low clouds drifted across the ridgeline, carrying a thin mist that clung to the earth and softened the edges of everything. The hill looked quieter now, almost peaceful. But Ethan knew better. Peace didn't linger in places like this, not real peace. Shadow was already awake. He stood near the bunker entrance, staring down at the steel door like he hadn't moved all night. His body was stiff, but his focus hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. Ethan stepped out of the truck, pulling his jacket tighter against the cold. You didn't sleep, he said. Shadow didn't turn. Ethan walked up beside him. Yeah, he muttered. Me neither. A second set of tires crunched against the gravel below. Ethan turned. Lucas Mercer's truck came into view first, followed by a smaller sedan, Clara. They parked near the base of the hill and stepped out almost at the same time. Lucas carried a case, equipment by the look of it. Clara brought nothing but a small canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Neither of them smiled. "Still standing," Clara said as she approached. "For now," Ethan replied. Lucas glanced at the bunker entrance, then at the ground around it. His eyes moved differently than Ethan's, less instinct, more calculation. "Weren't exaggerating," he said. "I don't do that." Lucas nodded. "Good." He knelt down near the disturbed soil, pulling a small handheld device from his case. It hummed faintly as he moved it across the ground, then toward the concrete wall. Ethan watched. "Well?" he asked. Lucas frowned slightly. "Background levels," he said. "Normal. Slight elevation near the structure, but nothing dangerous." Clara crossed her arms. "So the radiation story?" Lucas looked up. "Overblown," he said. "Or manufactured." Ethan felt something settle into place. "That's what I thought." Shadow moved then, not toward the entrance, past it, around the side of the hill. Ethan followed immediately. "Hey, where are you going?" Shadow didn't slow. He moved with purpose, limping slightly but refusing to let it slow him down. His nose stayed low, tracking something Ethan couldn't see. They rounded the side of the hill. The ground dipped slightly there, forming a shallow curve where water might collect after rain. The grass grew thinner in this section, revealing patches of dirt and stone. Shadow stopped. Ethan caught up, scanning the area. "What is it?" Shadow pawed once at the ground. Ethan crouched down. At first he saw nothing. Then, a faint indentation, not natural, not random, a line, straight. He brushed away the loose dirt with his hand. "Concrete, a seam, another structure," he said. Lucas and Clara joined them, both leaning in to see. Lucas adjusted his glasses. "This isn't on any map I've seen," he said. Clara shook her head slowly. They didn't want it to be. Ethan looked back toward the bunker entrance. 2 access points, one visible, one hidden. Redundancy, he said. Or something they didn't want people to find easily. Shadow huffed softly, then turned back toward the main entrance, like he'd made his point. Ethan stood. "We go through the front," he said. "Whatever's in there, this leads to it." Lucas nodded. "Let's document everything," he added. Clara didn't argue. They moved together toward the bunker. Inside, the air felt colder than the day before. Not physically, something else. Ethan led the way this time, flashlight steady, footsteps controlled. Lucas followed, scanning the walls with his equipment. Clara brought up the rear, watching everything. Shadow stayed close to Ethan's side. The first chamber passed quickly, no hesitation, no distractions. They moved straight into the inner corridor, straight to the vault. The round steel door stood where it had before, unchanged. But now, it didn't feel sealed. It felt waiting. Lucas stepped forward, examining the lock. "Manual mechanism," he said. "No electronics. Old design. Built to last." "Can it be opened?" Ethan asked. Lucas hesitated. "Probably," he said, "but we don't know what's behind it." Ethan glanced at Shadow. The dog was already in position, sitting, facing the door, waiting. That decided it. Ethan stepped forward and placed both hands on the wheel lock. The metal was cold, heavy. He took a breath, then turned. At first, nothing happened. Then, a shift, deep, mechanical. The sound rolled through the corridor like something waking up after a long sleep. Clara stiffened. Lucas stepped back slightly. Ethan kept turning. The resistance increased, then gave. The wheel moved another inch, then another, until a loud final clunk echoed from inside the door. The lock released. Silence followed. Thick, heavy. Ethan didn't open it right away. He looked at the others. "Ready?" he asked. Clara nodded once. Lucas swallowed, then nodded too. Shadow stood. Ethan turned back to the door and pulled. The hinges groaned. The seal broke. A rush of stale air pushed past them, carrying a scent that didn't belong to abandonment. Metal, oil, paper, history. The door opened slowly, revealing darkness beyond. Ethan stepped forward, raising the flashlight. The beam cut through the black and landed on shelves, crates, rows of metal containers stacked with precision, not random, not decayed, organized, maintained. Lucas let out a quiet breath. "This wasn't abandoned," he said. "No," Ethan replied. They stepped inside. The room was larger than expected, the ceiling higher, the walls lined with reinforced supports. Dust covered everything, but not evenly. Some areas were cleaner, disturbed. Ethan moved deeper into the vault. Shadow stayed close, his body tense but controlled. Clara approached a set of filing cabinets along the wall. Lucas examined one of the crates. Ethan reached a table near the center of the room. Something sat on it, small, metal. He picked it up, turned it in his hand. Dog tags, old, worn. The chain was rusted, but intact. Ethan's breath slowed. He wiped the surface with his thumb. The letters beneath emerged slowly. Rank, serial number. His eyes locked on the name, and everything else disappeared. Daniel Cole. The world narrowed. The bunker, the hill, the sheriff, gone. Just that name. His father, declared dead decades ago. Training accident, closed case. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. Behind him, Clara stepped closer. "What is it?" she asked softly. Ethan didn't answer. He handed her the tags. She read them, and her expression changed. Lucas joined them, looking over her shoulder. Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. Shadow stepped forward, pressing his body lightly against Ethan's leg, grounding him, keeping him here. Ethan stared at the empty space in front of him. "He was never here," he said quietly. "That's what they told us." No one spoke. Ethan's hand tightened slowly into a fist. The pieces came together. Not all of them, not yet. "But enough. This isn't just about the bunker," he said. Clara shook her head. "No," she replied. "It never was." Lucas looked around the room again, at the crates, at the files, at the structure of it all. "This is a storage facility," he said. "Government, strategic, something they didn't want anyone to find." Ethan looked back at the dog tags, then at the vault, then at the door behind them. "They didn't just hide this place," he said. His voice was steady now. Cold, they buried the truth with it. Shadow stayed close, silent, but present, because whatever had been hidden here wasn't just history anymore. It was personal, and there was no turning back from that. Ethan didn't remember leaving the vault. One moment he was standing under the dim beam of his flashlight, staring at his father's name etched into cold metal. The next, he was outside the bunker, the sky already darkening, the wind sharper than before. Shadow stayed close, closer than usual. The dog didn't stray, didn't scout, didn't circle the perimeter like he normally would. He stayed within arm's reach, his body angled toward Ethan, as if the danger had shifted. From outside, to something deeper. Clara stood near the truck, arms folded tight. Lucas was pacing slowly, running through thoughts he hadn't said out loud yet. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, "They'll come," Clara said. Ethan looked at her. "Who?" Clara didn't answer directly. "People don't build something like that and forget about it," she said. "They protect it, even after it's buried." Lucas stopped pacing. "She's right," he said. "You've got gold down there. Documents, evidence. That's not something that just sits." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They already know," he said. Both of them looked at him. "The sheriff," Ethan added. "He knew enough to offer money. That wasn't random." The wind picked up again, carrying the faint rumble of something far off. Thunder. Lucas glanced at the sky. "We should secure what we can," he said. "Document everything. Make copies." Ethan nodded once. "Tomorrow," he said. Clara frowned. Tomorrow might be too late. Ethan looked back toward the bunker, toward the entrance that now felt less like a doorway and more like a line that had already been crossed. "Then we stay tonight," he said. Lucas hesitated. Clara didn't. "All right," she said. "Then we stay." Night came fast. The kind of night that swallowed the land whole. No city lights. No distant glow. Just darkness stretching out in every direction, broken only by the faint outline of the hill against the sky. Ethan built a small fire near the entrance, not for warmth but for visibility. Control. Shadow lay nearby, head up, ears alert, watching, always watching. Clara sat on the tailgate of her car, wrapped in a blanket she'd brought without explanation. Lucas worked quietly with his equipment, scanning files, taking photos, cataloging everything they'd pulled from the vault. Ethan didn't sit. He stood, near the bunker entrance, looking out, listening. The wind moved differently at night, sharper, colder, carrying sounds farther than they should go. That's when he heard it. Not thunder, not wind, an engine, faint, low, but there. Ethan's head turned. Shadow was already on his feet. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, but his entire body tightened. "Someone's coming," Ethan said. Clara stood immediately. Lucas froze, listening. The engine cut off. Silence, then movement, not from the road, closer, from the side of the hill. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "They're not using the main path," he said. Shadow moved forward. Ethan grabbed his collar. "Stay close." The dog didn't resist. They moved together, slipping into the shadows near the bunker entrance. Clara and Lucas followed, keeping low. Another sound. Footsteps, more than one. Ethan counted the rhythm. 2, maybe 3, not locals wandering, not curious, purposeful. A beam of light cut briefly through the darkness, then disappeared. "Over there," Lucas whispered. Ethan nodded. He moved first, silent, controlled. Each step placed with precision that hadn't faded, no matter how long he'd been away from it. Shadow moved with him, no hesitation, no fear, just instinct. The first figure appeared near the side slope. Dark clothing, face partially covered, carrying something. A can. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Fuel. The second figure moved behind him, smaller, nervous. "Are you sure this is the place?" the second one whispered. "Just do it," the first replied. "We don't get paid to ask questions." Ethan didn't wait. He stepped out of the shadows. That's far enough. Both men froze. The first one turned quickly, reaching for something at his side. Shadow moved faster. He lunged forward with a burst of speed that didn't belong to an aging dog. His body slammed into the man's side, knocking him off balance. The fuel can hit the ground, spilled. The second man panicked. "Get him off!" Ethan was already there. He grabbed the man's arm, twisting it back, forcing him down onto the dirt. "Who sent you?" Ethan demanded. The man struggled. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ethan tightened his grip. The first man swung wildly, trying to free himself. Shadow held on, but the man reached down, grabbed something sharp from the ground, and swung. The sound came first, a short, sharp yelp, then blood. Ethan's vision narrowed instantly. "Shadow!" The dog stumbled back, his body recoiling as the man tore free. The second man broke loose from Ethan's grip and ran. The first followed, leaving the fuel can behind as they disappeared into the darkness. Ethan didn't chase them. He dropped to his knees. Shadow was already on the ground, breathing but shallow. Blood darkened the fur along his shoulder, spreading fast. Ethan's hands moved without thinking. Pressure, control, stay calm, stay focused. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey, stay with me." Shadow's eyes found his, still clear. "Still there." The dog tried to stand. Ethan pushed him gently back down. "No," he said. "Don't move." Clara rushed over, kneeling beside them. "Oh my God." Lucas followed, already pulling something from his bag. "I've got a kit," he said. "Move your hand. No, keep pressure. Just shift it." Ethan didn't hear everything, didn't process every word. He just stayed there, holding Shadow, keeping him here. "You're not done," Ethan whispered. "You hear me? You're not done." Shadow's breathing steadied slightly. Not normal, but fighting. Always fighting. Lucas worked quickly, cleaning the wound, wrapping it tight. "It's deep," he said, "but not fatal if we stop the bleeding." Ethan nodded once. "Then stop it." Clara looked toward the hill. "They came to burn it," she said. Ethan didn't look up. "Yeah," he replied. The fuel can sat a few feet away. Proof, intent. They weren't here to scare him. They were here to erase everything. Lucas finished the bandage, securing it in place. "That'll hold for now," he said. Ethan exhaled slowly. Then something shifted, not outside, inside, a realization, cold, clear. "They didn't come for the gold," he said. Clara frowned. "What?" Ethan finally looked up. "They came for the evidence," he said. "The files. The truth." Lucas's expression hardened. "That means they know exactly what's in there." Ethan nodded. "And they're not going to stop." Shadow shifted slightly beside him. Ethan placed a hand gently on his side. "I know," he said quietly. The dog's tail moved once. Weak, but there. Ethan looked back toward the bunker. The entrance stood open. Dark, silent, but no longer untouched. "They started this," he said. Clara met his eyes, and now. Ethan's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. It just settled into something unbreakable. "Now we finish it." The wind swept across the hill again, stronger than before, and somewhere in the distance, thunder answered. The sound rolled low across the valley, echoing off the hills like something ancient, shifting in its sleep. Ethan didn't move. He stayed kneeling beside Shadow, one hand resting gently against the dog's side, feeling each breath come and go. Slower now. Controlled. Still there. Alive. That's it, Ethan murmured. Stay with me. Shadow's eyes stayed on him, not scared, not confused, just steady, the same look he'd had on missions, the same look he'd given Ethan when things went bad, when the world narrowed down to one decision at a time. Stay, move, trust. Ethan swallowed hard. I've got you, he said quietly. Clara stood a few feet away, arms wrapped tight around herself, watching the dark slope where the attackers had vanished. They'll come back, she said. Lucas shook his head. Not tonight, he replied. They tried fast and failed. Next time they'll plan better. Ethan didn't respond. He knew Lucas was right. That was the problem. The hill had gone silent again. No engines, no footsteps, just wind, and the smell of fuel still hanging faintly in the air. Ethan helped Shadow up carefully. The dog resisted at first, instinct telling him to stand on his own. But the moment his weight shifted, his leg trembled, Ethan steadied him. Easy, he said. Shadow let him. That was when Ethan knew it was serious. They moved slowly into the bunker, not for protection, for control. Inside, the walls felt closer than before, the air heavier. The flashlight beams cut through the darkness in narrow slices, revealing the same cold surfaces, but nothing felt the same anymore. The place had been violated, not by time, by intent. Ethan guided Shadow to the first chamber, laying down a folded blanket near the wall. Stay here, he said. Shadow lowered himself slowly, muscles tight, breathing steady but strained. Ethan stayed beside him for a moment longer, then stood. The shift happened quietly, not outside, inside him. Clara watched it happen. You're going back down there, she said. Ethan nodded. They didn't come for nothing, he replied. That means we missed something. Lucas hesitated. You should rest, he said. Both of you. Ethan looked at him. I've been resting for years, he said. That ended the discussion. He picked up the flashlight and turned toward the inner corridor. Shadow lifted his head slightly. Ethan glanced back. Stay, he said. The dog didn't argue, but his eyes followed Ethan until the darkness swallowed him. The corridor felt longer now. Each step echoed louder than before, bouncing off the concrete in ways that made it hard to tell where the sound ended and the silence began. Ethan reached the vault. The door stood open, unchanged, waiting. He stepped inside. The beam of his flashlight moved across the shelves, the crates, the files scattered from earlier. Nothing looked disturbed, not yet, but that didn't mean nothing had changed. He moved slowly, scanning every surface again, every edge, every shadow, looking for something that didn't belong. And then, he saw it. The table, where the dog tags had been. Something else sat there now, small, black, out of place. Ethan approached carefully. He crouched down, keeping the light steady. A device, no bigger than a pack of matches, with a thin wire leading to a small adhesive strip. His jaw tightened. Listening device, he said under his breath. He reached out, but stopped himself. Instead, he circled around it, studying the placement, not random, not dropped, planted. That meant one thing. They'd been here before tonight, maybe while he was in town, maybe earlier, maybe watching him from the moment he stepped onto the hill. Ethan felt the familiar pressure building in his chest, not panic, focus. He pulled a cloth from his pocket and carefully lifted the device, avoiding direct contact, turned it over. No markings, no identifiers, clean, professional. He set it down gently on the table, Not just locals, he murmured. The realization settled deeper. This wasn't just about a small town secret. This was organized, layered, protected. Ethan looked around the vault again, at the crates, the documents, the dog tags still in his pocket, his father's name, his father's truth, and now, proof that someone was still actively trying to keep it buried. He exhaled slowly, then turned and walked back up the corridor. Clara and Lucas were waiting when he returned. Shadow hadn't moved, but his eyes were open, watching. Ethan held up the device. Clara's expression darkened immediately. "I told you," she said. "They're watching." Lucas stepped closer. "That's not cheap," he said. "That's deliberate placement. Clean install. Whoever did this knew exactly where to put it." Ethan nodded. "They've been inside," he said. Clara crossed her arms tighter. "Then nothing we say here is safe." Ethan looked around the chamber, then back at them. "Then we stopped talking," he said. Silence followed, heavy, intentional. Lucas nodded slowly, agreed. Ethan moved to the entrance of the bunker and looked out into the night. The storm was closer now. Lightning flickered faintly behind the clouds, followed by distant thunder that rolled longer each time. The hill looked different in that light, sharper, more exposed, like the storm was stripping away whatever cover it had left. Ethan turned back. "We move everything," he said. Clara frowned. "Where?" "Split it," Ethan replied. "Copies, photos, files. Nothing stays in one place." Lucas nodded immediately. "That's the only way," he said. Clara hesitated. Then, "All right," she said. They worked in silence, not rushed, not chaotic, precise. Each movement measured, each decision controlled. Ethan handled the documents. Lucas photographed and cataloged. Clara organized and secured. Shadow watched, even injured, even exhausted. He didn't sleep. He didn't close his eyes. He just stayed there, guarding. Hours passed. The storm grew louder, closer, until finally, rain hit the hill, hard, fast, relentless. The sound filled the bunker, drumming against the earth above them like a warning. Ethan stepped back from the table, looking at what they'd gathered. Enough for now. He walked back to Shadow and knelt beside him. The dog's breathing had steadied slightly, better, not healed, but fighting. Ethan placed a hand on his head. "You did good," he said quietly. Shadow's tail moved once. Ethan swallowed. For a moment, the bunker disappeared again. The hill, the storm, the danger, all of it. Gone. Just him and the dog. The only one who stayed. The only one who never questioned. Never left. Ethan leaned forward slightly, resting his forehead against Shadow's. "I should have listened sooner," he said. Shadow didn't respond. He didn't need to. Outside, thunder cracked closer now. The storm had arrived. Inside, the silence returned. Not empty, not calm, but steady, like something had shifted. Ethan stood, turned toward the entrance. The rain blurred the world beyond, turning the hill into a shadow behind a curtain of water. "They're not done," Clara said behind him. Ethan nodded. "I know." Lucas stepped closer. "Then what do we do?" Ethan didn't look back. His eyes stayed on the storm, on the hill, on everything that had been hidden and was now coming to light. "We don't wait," he said. His voice was quiet, but final. "We finish this before they get another chance." Lightning flashed across the sky. and for a brief second, the hill stood fully illuminated, exposed. No longer just a place, but a truth, one that had survived decades in the dark, and now refused to stay buried. The storm pressed down on the hill like a weight. Rain hammered the earth above the bunker, turning the outside world into a blur of motion and sound. Inside, the air felt tighter, sharper, like the walls themselves were listening. Ethan stood near the entrance, watching the water run in thin streams along the concrete edge. "They were desperate tonight," Clara said quietly behind him. Ethan nodded. "Desperate enough to burn everything," he replied. Lucas leaned against the table, arms crossed. "That means whatever's in those files, it's bigger than just stolen gold." Ethan turned back toward them. "Then when we stop guessing," he said, "we prove it." Clara stepped forward. "I've seen this before," she said. "Not this exact thing, but patterns like it. Small towns, old land, buried records. Things people pretend don't exist because it's easier." Lucas picked up one of the folders. "These shipment logs," he said. "They don't line up. Dates overlap. Inventory numbers repeat." Ethan moved closer. "Explain." Lucas pointed to a line, "This crate here, listed as received." Then again, 2 weeks later, same code, same contents. "That shouldn't happen," Clara said. "It doesn't," Lucas replied, "unless something was taken in between." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Or replaced," he added. Silence followed. The idea settled in, not just theft, manipulation, a system built to hide the difference. Clara reached for another document, flipping it open carefully. "There's more," she said. "Old county records, names tied to the site." She scanned the page, then looked up, Holloway. The name landed heavy. Ethan didn't react immediately. "Sheriff Holloway?" Lucas asked. Clara nodded. Not just him, his father. Maybe even earlier. Lucas let out a slow breath. "That's decades." Ethan looked toward the corridor leading to the vault. "They didn't just protect this place," he said. "They built a story around it." Clara's eyes sharpened. "The radiation," she said. Lucas nodded. "It's exaggerated," he added. "We already know that." Ethan stepped closer to the table. "They made people afraid," he said. "Kept them away. No questions. No witnesses." Clara folded her arms. "And anyone who got too curious." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out the dog tags. The metal caught the light. Dull but steady. Daniel Cole, his father's name. "Like him," Ethan said. The room went quiet again. Lucas looked down at the tags. "You think he found out?" he asked. Ethan nodded slowly. "He refused something," he said. "Signed nothing. Reported something." Clara's voice softened, and they silenced it. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was already there, in the files, in the patterns, in the fear that still surrounded the hill. Lucas flipped through another folder. "There's a contractor listed here," he said. "Multiple times, same company name." Ethan leaned in. "Which one?" Lucas tapped the page. "Northridge Logistics." Clara frowned. "I've heard of them," she said. "They handled a lot of federal transfers back then." Lucas shook his head. "Not just transfers," he said. "Look at this." He turned the page. "Authorization signatures," he added. "County oversight." Ethan's eyes narrowed. Signed by Lucas didn't need to look. "Holloway," he said. The storm cracked louder above them. Thunder rolled hard enough to shake dust loose from the ceiling. Ethan stepped back slightly. So they controlled the shipments, he said. The records, the access. Clara nodded. And the narrative, she added. The fear. Lucas looked up. That's how you hide something for 40 years, he said. You don't lock it away. You make sure no one wants to find it. Ethan exhaled slowly. Everything was connecting now. The warnings, the rumors, the attacks, the listening device. All of it leads back to them, he said. Clara met his eyes. And they know you're onto it. Ethan didn't look away. Good, he said. Lucas raised an eyebrow. That's not exactly comforting. Ethan's voice stayed calm. It's predictable, he said. And predictable is something you can plan against. Clara studied him. You're already thinking ahead. Ethan nodded once. They'll escalate, he said. They won't stop until this is gone. Lucas glanced at the entrance. They tried fire already, and failed, Ethan replied. Clara stepped closer. What's next? Ethan looked down at the files, at the evidence, at the truth that had been buried under layers of fear and silence. We get it out, he said. Lucas frowned. To who? Ethan thought for a moment. Then, someone outside this town, he said. Someone they can't control. Clara's expression shifted slightly. There might be someone, she said. Ethan looked at her. A reporter, she added. Used to work regional cases, corruption, land disputes, government cover-ups. Lucas nodded. That could work. Ethan considered it. If we send it, he said, we send enough that it can't be buried again. Clara agreed. And we don't send it all at once, she added. We stagger it, make it harder to intercept. Lucas looked between them. You've done this before, he said. Clara gave a small, tired smile. I've lived here long enough, she replied. Ethan turned back toward Shadow. The dog hadn't moved much, but his eyes were open, watching, always watching. Ethan walked over and knelt beside him. You hear that? He said quietly. We're getting close. Shadow's tail moved once, weak but certain. Ethan placed a hand on his side. You just keep fighting, he said. The dog's breathing stayed steady, not strong, but holding. Ethan stood again. The storm was beginning to ease outside. The rain softened. The thunder moved farther away, but something else remained. A pressure, not from the sky, from what they now understood. Clara gathered a stack of documents. I'll make copies in the morning, she said. Lucas nodded. I'll verify what I can tonight, he added. Cross-reference names, dates, anything that strengthens this. Ethan looked at both of them. We move fast, he said, before they do. Clara didn't hesitate. We're already late, she replied. Ethan turned back toward the entrance. The hill was still dark, still quiet. But it didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't hiding, not anymore. The truth had started to rise, and once something like that begins, it doesn't stop easily. Ethan stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp after the rain. Clouds drifted apart slowly, revealing a thin line of moonlight breaking through. He looked out over the land, over the road, over everything that had tried to stay hidden. They built a lie, he said quietly. Clara stepped beside him. And now? She asked. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed ahead. Now we tear it apart, he said. Behind them, in the bunker, the files waited, the evidence, the truth, and for the first time in decades, it had someone willing to fight for it. The mountain didn't answer. It never did. It just watched. The clouds hung low over the Montana backcountry, thick and heavy, pressing the sky down until it felt close enough to touch. The storm hadn't passed. It had only paused. Ethan stood at the bunker entrance, breathing in the cold air. Something was coming, not weather, not just weather. Behind him, Clara and Lucas worked quickly, organizing files into waterproof cases, sealing evidence into layers of protection. Every movement was quieter now, sharper. No wasted motion. Shadow shifted slightly on the blanket. Ethan turned. The dog was trying to rise. "Stay down," Ethan said. Shadow ignored him. He pushed himself up slowly, his injured shoulder trembling under the effort. But he stood. Not steady, not strong, but standing. Ethan walked over, crouching beside him. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. Shadow's eyes met his, clear, unwavering. Ethan exhaled. "Yeah," he said. "I know. The dog wasn't trying to prove anything. He was staying in the fight." Outside, the wind changed. It didn't rise. It shifted. Ethan felt it instantly, that subtle turn in the air, the kind that didn't belong to nature. He stood. "They're coming," he said. Lucas froze. "You hear something?" "No," Ethan replied. "That's the problem." Clara stepped toward the entrance. The hill stretched out in front of them, dark and quiet. Too quiet. Then, a flicker, down near the road, headlights, gone as quickly as they appeared. Lucas swallowed. "That's not normal." Ethan nodded. "They killed them on purpose," he said. "They don't want to be seen." Clara's voice dropped. "How many?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He watched the darkness, listened, counted. "More than last time," he said. The storm returned with a sudden crack of thunder that shook the ground. Rain followed instantly, heavy, blinding, the perfect cover. "Move everything inside," Ethan said. "Now." They didn't argue. Lucas grabbed the last case. Clara sealed another. Ethan stepped outside once more, scanning the slope. Then he saw it. Movement. Low, fast. Figures slipping between shadows, using the terrain like they knew it. Not random, not careless, trained. Ethan stepped back into the bunker. "They're already on the hill," he said. Lucas's face tightened. "How close?" Ethan met his eyes. "Close enough." The lights inside flickered, then gone. Darkness swallowed the bunker. "Power's out," Lucas said. "Not just the storm," Ethan replied. Clara's voice came from the shadows. "They cut it." Ethan reached for his flashlight, clicked it on. A narrow beam cut through the dark. "Stay behind me," he said. Shadow moved to his side. Not behind, never behind. Ethan didn't argue this time. The first sound came from the side corridor. A scrape. Metal on concrete. Someone inside. "Lucas," Ethan whispered. "Take Clara, back room, now." Lucas grabbed her arm. They moved quickly, silently, disappearing into the deeper chamber. Ethan stepped forward, shadow beside him. The beam of light steadied. Another sound. Closer, a shape moved at the edge of the corridor. Then, a man stepped into the light. Face covered, eyes sharp, he held something in his hand. A small can. Fuel. Ethan didn't wait. "Drop it." The man hesitated, then smiled behind the cloth, and ran, straight toward the main chamber. Ethan moved instantly. Shadow launched forward. The man swung the can, trying to throw it, but Shadow hit him first, slamming into his side. The can fell, rolled, spilled. The smell hit instantly. Gasoline. Another figure burst in from behind, then another, 3. Ethan grabbed the first man, driving him into the wall. The second rushed forward. Ethan ducked the swing, countered hard. sending him stumbling back. The third raised something. A device! Sparks flashed. Get back! Clara shouted from behind. Ethan shoved the first man aside and kicked the device away before it could ignite. It skidded across the floor. Dead, the second attacker lunged again. Shadow intercepted. Despite the injury, despite everything, the dog moved like instinct hadn't aged a day. He hit the man low, knocking him off balance, but the man reacted fast. Too fast. A blade flashed. Ethan saw it too late. Shadow, the strike landed. Not deep, but enough. The dog staggered. Ethan's world narrowed instantly. He grabbed the attacker, slamming him into the ground hard enough to end the fight. The third man ran. The first followed. They didn't stay. They never intended to. This wasn't a battle. It was a strike, a test. And they'd seen enough. Klaus returned, heavy, broken only by rain and breathing. Ethan dropped to his knees. Shadow was down again. Blood darkened the bandage. Fresh, spreading. Me, Ethan said, hands already pressing, steady, controlled. Clara rushed forward, Lucas close behind. We need to stop this, Lucas said, grabbing supplies. Ethan didn't look up. Then stop it, he said. Lucas worked fast. Clara held the light steady. The bunker smelled sharp now. Fuel, metal, blood, war. Shadow's breathing came uneven, but steady, still steady. Ethan leaned closer. You're not done, he said quietly. You hear me? Shadow's eyes stayed on him, not fading, not quitting, just there, always there. Lucas tightened the bandage. That's all I can do right now, he said. He needs a real vet. Ethan nodded once, but he didn't move. Not yet. Outside, a new sound. Sirens, distant, but coming. Clara looked up. You called someone? Lucas shook his head. No. Ethan finally stood, slowly, carefully. He looked toward the entrance. The flashing lights appeared faintly through the rain. Red dot blue, growing closer. Not them, Ethan said. Clara frowned. Then who? Ethan's eyes narrowed. They didn't call this in, he said. They don't want attention. Lucas stepped forward. Then someone else did. Clara's expression shifted. The files, she said. We sent some out. Ethan nodded. Someone's paying attention now. The sirens grew louder, closer. The attackers were gone. The storm was breaking, and the hill was no longer hidden. Ethan looked back at Shadow, then at the bunker, at the evidence, at everything that had been buried. This isn't over, he said. Clara stepped beside him. No, she replied. Ethan's voice stayed calm. But now, he said, they can't stop it. Lightning flashed one last time across the sky, and for the first time, the darkness didn't feel like control. It felt like something losing it. The sirens cut through the storm like a blade, closer now, not distant echoes. Real engines grinding up the dirt road, tires slipping in mud, lights flashing through sheets of rain. Ethan stood at the bunker entrance, rain soaking through his shirt. But he didn't move. He watched, waited, measured. Him, Clara and Lucas worked quickly, securing the last of the evidence into sealed cases. Every document now had a place. Every file had a copy. Nothing would vanish again. Shadow lay just inside the bunker, breathing low, steady, but fragile. Ethan glanced back once, just once, then forward again. The first vehicle broke through the rain, black, not local. The second followed, then a third. They didn't slow, didn't hesitate. They came straight up the hill like they already knew what they would find. The engines cut, doors opened, figures stepped out, not rushed, not aggressive, controlled, professional, Ethan exhaled slowly. Federal, he said. Clara stepped beside him. You're sure? Ethan nodded. They move different. Flashlights cut through the rain, beams steady and deliberate. One of the agents stepped forward. Ethan Cole? The voice called out. Ethan didn't step back. Depends who's asking, he replied. The man lowered his hood. Badge visible, Agent Walker. Federal Investigative Unit, he said. We received partial evidence transmissions tied to this location. Lucas let out a breath behind Ethan. Clara didn't move. Ethan nodded once. You're late, he said. Agent Walker didn't react. We came as fast as we could, he replied. Ethan stepped aside. Then come see what they were trying to burn. The agents moved in. Fast, efficient. They spread out through the bunker, scanning, documenting, securing. The scene told its own story. Fuel on the floor, damaged equipment, blood, files, everything left behind. Agent Walker crouched near the spilled gasoline, intent to destroy evidence, he said quietly. Another agent approached. We've got footprints, multiple entry points, she added. Organized. Walker stood. Where's the evidence you sent? Clara stepped forward. Here, she said, handing over a sealed case. Walker took it carefully, opened it just enough to glance inside, then closed it again. His expression didn't change much, but it changed enough. This is bigger than local, he said. Ethan crossed his arms. I know. Walker looked at him. You understand what you've stepped into. Ethan met his gaze. I've been in worse, he said. A beat of silence. Then Walker nodded once. All right, he said. Then we finish it. It didn't take long. The storm faded. The work didn't. More vehicles arrived. More agents. The hill turned from a place of silence into a controlled scene of movement. Lights, voices, equipment, documentation. The bunker was no longer hidden. It was open, exposed, and for the first time in decades, protected. Ethan stood off to the side, watching, not part of it. Not outside it either, somewhere in between. Clara approached him. They're taking everything, she said. Ethan nodded. They have to. Lucas joined them. This is enough, he said. The records, the gold, the names. It all connects. Ethan looked toward the vault. The door stood open, emptying. Agents moved carefully, cataloging each piece. Gold bars lifted, photographed, logged, taken, not treasure. Evidence. Clara studied Ethan's face. You don't care about the gold, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan shook his head. Never did. Lucas frowned slightly. Most people would. Ethan's voice stayed calm. Most people didn't find their father buried under it, he said. That ended the conversation. It happened just before dawn, the sky barely beginning to lighten, the rain gone, the air cold and clean. Another vehicle arrived. Different, local. Sheriff Grant Holloway stepped out. He didn't rush, didn't show surprise, but something in his posture had changed. Less control, more tension. He walked toward the bunker, stopped when he saw the agents, the lights, the scene. Agent Walker stepped forward. Sheriff Holloway, he said. Holloway nodded slowly. Quite the situation, he replied. Walker didn't smile. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Holloway glanced past him, at Ethan. Their eyes met. For a moment, nothing else existed. No agents, no storm, no evidence, just two men, and everything between them. You've been busy, Holloway said. Ethan didn't answer. Walker stepped closer. "Sheriff, we have records linking your office and your family to this site over several decades." Holloway's expression didn't break. "Records can be misinterpreted," he said. Walker held up the case Clara had given him. "These won't be..." Silence. Heavy. Final. Holloway looked around once more. At the agents, at the bunker, at the truth that had finally surfaced. Then he exhaled, small, barely noticeable, but enough. Walker nodded to the agents behind him. They stepped forward. "Sheriff Grant Holloway," Walker said, voice steady. "You are being detained pending investigation into federal corruption, evidence suppression, and obstruction." The words landed clean. No drama, no shouting, just fact. Holloway didn't resist, didn't argue. He held Ethan's gaze for 1 second longer. Then he turned, hands behind his back. The cuffs clicked. Quiet, but louder than anything that had happened on the hill. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Lucas looked stunned. Ethan didn't move, didn't react. Not outwardly, but something inside him shifted, loosened. Not relief, not yet. Something deeper. The sun rose slowly over the Montana backcountry. Light spread across the hills, touching the bunker, the road, the agents still working. The storm was gone, completely, like it had never been there. Ethan walked back inside. Shadow was still lying where he'd left him. Breathing, still breathing. Ethan knelt beside him. "They're done," he said quietly. "It's over." Shadow's eyes opened slightly, focused. Ethan placed a hand gently on his side. "You held the line," he said. The dog's tail moved once, weak but certain. Clara stepped into the doorway. "They're asking for you," she said. Statement, timeline. Ethan nodded. "In a minute." She didn't push. She understood. Lucas stood behind her, silent, respectful. Ethan stayed where he was for a moment longer. Just him and the dog and everything that had led them here. "You didn't let it stay buried," he said. Shadow didn't move. He didn't need to. Ethan stood slowly, turned toward the light filling the bunker, toward the agents, toward the world that now knew the truth. It had taken decades. It had cost everything. But the lie was finally gone. And for the first time, the hill was quiet, not hiding, not waiting, just still, like it had been waiting for someone to set it free. The hill looked different in the morning light. Not because anything had changed on the surface. The same grass bent under the wind, the same dirt road cut through the slope, the same bunker sat half-hidden beneath earth and time. But the weight was gone. The silence wasn't hiding anything anymore. It was resting. Months passed, slow at first, then faster. Like life had been waiting just outside the edge of the hill, unsure if it was allowed to return. Ethan stayed. He didn't leave after the agents packed up. Didn't disappear once the reports were filed. Once the news cycle moved on. Once the world labeled the story and moved forward. He stayed. At first it was just repairs, fixing the entrance, clearing debris, reinforcing the structure. Lucas came back often, bringing equipment, helping assess what could be salvaged and what needed to be rebuilt. Clara visited almost daily, sometimes with food, sometimes with nothing but quiet company. Neither of them asked Ethan what came next. They didn't need to. They could see it forming, piece by piece. The bunker changed. Not all at once, but steadily. The first thing Ethan removed was the warning sign, the one that had kept people away for decades. He unscrewed it slowly, holding it in his hands for a long moment before setting it aside. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was a lie. The second thing he did was open the vault. Not to the public, not for curiosity, just open. The heavy door no longer sealed anything away. It stayed unlocked. Light reaching into a place that had known nothing but darkness. Shadow watched all of it. From the entrance, from the edge of the hill, from wherever Ethan was, the dog moved slower now, careful with each step. The injury had healed, but not completely, and age had caught up with him in quiet ways. But his eyes hadn't changed, still sharp, still aware, still watching, always watching. The first dog arrived in early spring, a retired military K9, older, thin, eyes uncertain. He didn't trust the open space, didn't trust the silence, didn't trust the people. Ethan didn't force it. He simply opened the gate, stepped back, and waited. Shadow was there, sitting, not approaching, not challenging, just present. The new dog circled slowly, watching, testing. Then, after a long moment, he lay down, not fully relaxed, but enough. Ethan nodded slightly. "That's a start," he said. More came after that, not many at first, just a few. Dogs that had served, dogs that had been trained to protect, to detect, to act. And then, left behind when their work was done, Ethan didn't try to train them again, didn't try to fix them. He just gave them space, food, time, and something they hadn't had in a long while. Peace. Clara helped with paperwork. Lucas handled structural upgrades. People from nearby towns began to hear about the place, not as a bunker, not as a secret, but as something else. A sanctuary. The name came later. Ethan didn't plan it. He just carved it into a piece of wood one afternoon and mounted it near the entrance. Coal Hill Sanctuary. The letters weren't perfect, but they didn't need to be. Summer came, warm, bright. The hill changed color, turning gold under the sun. The bunker entrance no longer looked abandoned. It looked lived in, alive. Dogs moved across the land freely. Some played, some rested, some simply lay in the sun, doing nothing at all, and that was enough. Shadow remained at the center of it all, not because Ethan placed him there, because the others did. They watched him, followed him, learned from him. He didn't lead with commands. He led with presence, with calm, with certainty. Ethan saw it every day, and every day it meant something different. The evening it happened was quiet. No storm, no tension, just wind moving gently across the grass. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the hill. Ethan sat near the bunker entrance. Shadow lay beside him, head resting against Ethan's boot. The other dogs were scattered across the land. Peaceful, still. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from emptiness, but from something finally settling into place. Ethan looked down. Shadow's breathing had changed, slower, softer. He knew. Of course he knew. He had seen it before, too many times, but this was different. He placed a hand gently on Shadow's head. "You did enough," he said quietly. "No orders, no commands, just truth." Shadow's eyes opened slightly, met his for a moment. It was all there, every step, every fight, every mile they had walked together. Then, a soft breath, a small shift, and stillness, dull stillness, not waiting, not guarding. Rest. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He stayed there as the sun dipped lower, as the light faded, as the world continued around him. Clara found him there later. She didn't say anything, just stood nearby, respecting the silence. Lucas arrived after. Same thing, no words, just presence. Ethan finally moved when the stars came out, slowly, carefully. He lifted Shadow, carried him to a place near the entrance, the same place where the dog had spent most of his days watching over the hill. They buried him there, not deep, not hidden, just enough. Ethan placed a marker, simple wood, hand-carved. Shadow Guardian of the Hill. Clara read it, nodded once. Lucas looked out across the land. He kept it safe, he said. Ethan shook his head slightly. He kept me here, he replied. Time moved again, as it always does. The sanctuary grew, not large, not crowded, just enough. Dogs came, dogs stayed, dogs healed. Ethan stayed too, not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he had finally found somewhere worth staying. The bunker remained open, not as a secret, not as a warning, but as a reminder. Inside, on one wall, Ethan placed two things: his father's name, restored, cleared, no longer buried under lies, and beside it, a simple metal tag, worn, faded, but real. He didn't explain it to visitors, he didn't need to. Some stories don't need words, they just need to be seen. One evening, months later, Ethan stood at the edge of the hill, looking out over everything, the land, the dogs, the bunker, the sky stretching wide and open above it all. The wind moved gently across the grass, soft, calm. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was running, didn't feel like he was chasing something or hiding from it. He just stood there, present, whole, at peace. Behind him, the dogs settled in for the night, and near the entrance, a small wooden marker stood quietly in the fading light, watching, guarding, doing its job, not because it had to, but because it chose to. Ethan exhaled slowly, then turned back toward the hill, toward home, and this time, he stayed. If you believe some things are worth standing your ground for, type yes in the comments. And if stories like this mean something to you, stick around and subscribe. We've got more coming about justice, dignity, and never backing down.